At the close of the Age of Fire, all lands meet at the end of the earth. Great kingdoms and anemic townships will be one and the same. The great tide of human enterprise, all for naught. That's why I'm so taken by this grand sight. This must be what it's like to be a god.
So here we are again, folks, at the Dreg Heap. On my previous video, I explained at large the links between the Dreg Heap and the Church of the Deep. And although I did briefly mention some elements from this area, I did not really mention a lot of the lore contained within the Dreg Heap. Many of you have brought forth some interesting points, and I will address those in the next video, which will be our first lore riposte, in which I will respond to all of those questions. However, in this video, I want to address the other elements of lore present in the Dreg Heap. When we first arrive at the Dreg Heap, we get to meet a very interesting character in the form of the Stone-Humped Hag. The Stone-Humped Hag is a pilgrim of Londor, as we can plainly see, but there is more than meets the eye with her. An interesting thing that we can notice is that she has some inside knowledge about some very obscure things, like the Pygmies and the Ring City. However, it is unlikely that she was present while these events were unfolding, so it is very probable that her knowledge is second-hand. We also find out an important fact about her character by killing her and analyzing her ashes. Umbral ash of the old stone-humped woman. Things that have dreadfully run their course accrue at the great Dreg Heap. This old woman was once the wet nurse of royalty. So, out of the bat, it is a fact that the Stone-Humped Hag was a wed nurse to royalty. We can also see that she is wearing the Priestess Ring, which item description reads, "A ring engraved with a portrait of the High Priestess. In Lothric, the High Priestess has long been considered one of the three pillars of the king's rule. The High Priestess also served as the prince's wed nurse." So it is quite apparent that the Stone-Humped Hag was in fact a wed nurse for Lothric's royalty, specifically. This is further confirmed by her dialogue.
Far below, there's a deep, dark hole carved out of a tree. From time to time, voices brim from the depths of the cavity even now. Mutterings of the very demon that Prince Lorien spoke of, I'm sure. Horrible sounds of an afflicted thing, yet cursing men.
The way she speaks about Prince Lorien, in a very familiar manner, indicates some sort of personal relationship. There is also an additional element to this puzzle which we can infer. The High Priestess is considered one of the three pillars of Lothric. If we think about it, that would mean that she would have had unfettered access to the Grand Archives, and all of the documents, records, and information contained within. No wonder she possesses all of that knowledge. So, we know for a fact that she is a wed nurse of Lothric's royalty, but what is her identity specifically? If you ask me, there are two possible identities for her, either Emma or the Shrine Handmaiden, as they are both confirmed to have been wed nurses of royalty. I would lean harder on it being the Shrine Handmaiden, just because Emma has been killed, and in her dialogue she does say that we expect her to be brimming with goodies, as if she had been selling goods for ages. But this is Dark Souls, and just think about how fleeting death is in this realm, so who knows in the end. Now let's move on to the next element of lore in the Dreg Heap. All throughout the Dreg Heap, we find messages that Slave Knight Gale has left for us. Most of them indicate that we should take the plunge, reassuring us that we will not die. One very interesting element common within these messages is that he always leaves a bit of his red cape next to each one of these messages. If we analyze the fact that he is leaving these messages and also these protection circles that we can see when we fall off any of the high places, it is quite apparent that Gale is trying to spur us on and protect us as much as he can while we follow in his footsteps. I will not delve much deeper into Gale, as I am planning to do a video on him specifically in the future. He's such a wonderful character, and I want to do him justice by dedicating a whole video just to him. Once we reach Gale's second message, we get to meet one of the coolest, albeit one of the most annoying, enemies in the Dreg Heap, the Gatling Gun Angel. Now these douchebags will tear you to shreds in seconds, encouraging us to take a more sneaky souls approach than what we had seen in the whole game up to that point. To me, they reminded me of the Winter Lanterns in Bloodborne, an enemy where you have to sneak past them to avoid the massive damage they can easily deal. Now, if you notice here, the angel is being summoned by these cocoon pilgrims. If we look at them closely, we can see that this puppy-like being is growing out of the pilgrim, and it is this being that is summoning and controlling the angel. Once we defeat it, poof, the angel is gone. However, if you do not defeat this being, it doesn't matter how many times you kill the angel, it will just be resummoned again. I find it very interesting how it is not until now, at the end of the world, that we find out why the pilgrims of Londor were trying to die in Lothric. Also, these angels remind us of another one of the enemies we fought previously in Lothric Castle, the Pilgrim Butterfly. Now, it is uncertain what set of conditions have to be met for a pilgrim to become a butterfly and which ones for it to become an angel. In my very personal opinion, I think that they are merely stages of evolution, like in Pokemon. The pilgrim dying is the first stage, the Pilgrim Butterfly is the first evolution, and the Pilgrim Angel is the final evolution. And at any stage, not every individual is strong enough to trigger the next step. However, I might just be missing something and making up stories. Let me know what you think, folks. Is the Pilgrim Angel the Charizard of Dark Souls? So with this in mind, let's look at what happens when you kill this stone-humped hag. So yeah, she summons an angel, but with no cocoon, so what the hell, FromSoft? Her dialogue is also very interesting, as she is showing a very deep desire to witness an angel. Maybe both are connected, this faith and very deep desire triggering the appearance of the angel. But enough of the angels, let's move on to another character we find on the Dreg Heap, the Howl Legion Knights. We find a total of 2 of these knights, roaming throughout the Dreg Heap. Now let's start with taking a look at their gear. Giant gold decorated curved sword wielded by the warriors of the Howl Legion, who sought the Dark Soul. The swords sank into the dark with the Legion, where their blades were severely corroded. Now let's take a look at the armor. Armor worn by the Howl Legion, who sought the Dark Soul. Their armor sank into the dark with the Legion, where their cavities bloated in grotesque displays, never again to fit any ordinarily shaped body. So the Howl Legion were knights from an unknown kingdom who were either sent or were trying to find and retrieve the Dark Soul, but they just never returned, as both them and their gear were swallowed by the dark. So much so that dark is all that remains inside of the armor. Now I have a nice little theory about what kingdom this might be, but it really is drenched in speculation, and it needs too much of a setup to elaborate on it here. However, it is worth to mention that the location of the Dark Soul was more common knowledge than we originally expected. This fact was just never revealed to us while we were playing Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. Now I have to go back to my previous video. On my last video I commented on the dead dragons, and I was very rightly corrected by Ozzy, who pointed out they were not dragons, but wyverns. There is not much extra lore stemming from them, other than to set the main stage of the Dreg Heap at Lothar Castle. Also, on my previous video, I also mentioned the Petrified Puss of Man that we find here. If we look at them a little bit more closely, we can see that they are much larger than what they used to be. They are missing their host, or at least we cannot find it around them. The Puss of Man are obviously parasites that grow inside the host's body, and, at least originally, they need of the host to survive. As proof of this, if you kill any one of the hollows atop the high wall of Lothric that are infected with the Puss of Man before they transform, both the host and the parasite perish instantly. I believe that these enemies are the result of Osiris's experiments. If you think about it, every single one of the Puss of Man that we encounter in the game is located somewhere where Osiris, as the king of Lothric, would have had easy access. Udex Gundyr, the high wall of Lothric, the infected wyverns inside of Lothar Castle, and obviously the 3 Puss of Man we find around the King's Garden. Now, I think that after the Puss of Man are left for an extended period of time inside their host, they eventually grow to this massive size, and they no longer need it. If you ask me, I think they were just some of Osiris's first attempts at bringing or transforming men into dragon-like creatures, or maybe he was just attempting to strengthen feeble beings through his experiments. Who knows, maybe to produce the perfect heir. But ultimately he failed. Eventually, the consumed king would stumble upon Seath's research and acquire knowledge on the Serpent Men. And the rest, folks, the rest is history. I also find interesting that once the Puss of Man have reached their natural state, where they no longer have to infect a host's body, they eventually become essentially serpents. Throughout Dark Souls, serpents are beings that have been associated with the dark, as with Koth. Is it maybe possible that Koth himself had a hand in the creation of such beings? Who knows? The final element of the Dreg Heap I wanted to mention are the trees. All throughout the DLC, we find trees that are humongous in stature. If we reminisce back to Dark Souls 1, we did not really find any great trees, excluding the Great Hollow, which is clearly a great ancient arch tree. Same thing happens on Dark Souls 2, where we find big trees but nothing to the scope of these massive, almost all-encompassing ones. So it is not until Dark Souls 3 and its final DLC that we meet head-to-head with what might be the archtrees returning to their former glory. I think this might be FromSoft's way of nudging us to the cycle of the world, attempting to go back to the Age of the Ancients, as the whole landscape is looking increasingly more similar to what was portrayed to us in the introduction cinematic of Dark Souls 1, the Great Crags and the Archtrees. The cycles are meant to be repeated, and the world is doomed to go back to its original state, flameless, soulless, drab and gray. But there might just be a way to break the spell. So that's it for today, guys. Please tell me what you think about my ideas in the comment section, even if you entirely disagree with them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, it would help me a lot if you gave it a like. Also, if you like what I'm doing with the channel, consider subscribing. On my next video, I'm going to be addressing several of the comments that I have received in my past 2 videos, as well as doing some erratas on some things that I got wrong, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, This is Cheps, and I will see you soon.